Seth MacFarlane is a man of many voices. Take, for instance, these characters.
I've brought you the greatest gift of all, a child's laughter.
My name is Glenn Quagmire, and I say giggity, 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 giggity.
Ooh, you got some pie, huh? Can I have a piece?
Sure.
Ooh, let me have some of that Cool Whip.
What'd you say?
You can't have a pie without Cool Whip.
You have no idea how much we enjoyed putting that series of clips together. That is Seth MacFarlane, the creator of Family Guy, the voice behind Peter, Quagmire, Stewie, and Brian, and now the fellow who brought you all those voices is almost as well known for voices like this.
Some find it pleasant dining on pheasant. Those things roll off my knife. Just serve me tomatoes and mashed potatoes. Give me the simple life.
Seth MacFarlane's latest record is a collection of arrangements that were made for Frank Sinatra but never recorded. It's called Lush Life, this Lost Sinatra Arrangements. Seth has performed at the Hollywood Bowl, Carnegie Hall, the Royal Albert Hall. And this is such an interesting story, such interesting music. And I'm so happy to say Seth joins me now to talk about it. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. We had to start the interview abruptly because I was telling you how much I love some of the arrangers and I got nerdy about the orchestration of this record and some of the people who worked with Frank Sinatra. And you started to say, that's, how I got into Frank Sinatra. And I said, we better record this. So tell me how you got into Frank Sinatra.
Right. I was a big fan of film scores when I was a kid. I loved anything John Williams or Jerry Goldsmith or Elmer Bernstein or James Horner. I was just drawn to this stuff. I mean, I loved movies and, found an appreciation for film scores that way because my family was very musical. We grew up with a lot of music in the house and I was taught to really appreciate it. And in college, I randomly picked up an album of Sinatra songs that, for like $3 that didn't contain a lot of his most famous tunes. It wasn't My Way, it wasn't Fly Me to the Moon. It was, songs like Same Old Saturday Night. And when I heard particularly the ballads, I was struck by the fact that, especially as somebody who had never really sat down and listened to Sinatra before, how much like film scores his arrangements were. This was a vocalist who was essentially singing to expressive orchestral film music. That was how I reacted to it. I had been aware of Sinatra as a cultural influence in the same way that I've been aware of, Bob Hope and Bing Crosby and, these great performers who are ubiquitous. But I hadn't really sat down to listen to his music, and it was his ballads and largely his orchestration that really struck me.
I want to build the story here. So Frank Sinatra Jr. Guest stars on Family Guy in an episode called Brian Sings and Swings. What do you remember about having him on the show?
I remember seeing him on The Sopranos.
Yeah,
and
he plays cards. He's in a card game in The Sopranos.
He's in a poker game. Yeah. And thinking, gosh, this is if he did this show, would he do our show? I had seen him live, I think it was at the Canyon Club in Los Angeles, and I can't remember whether that was before or after he had done our show. I think it was before. So we put out the offer. We said, listen, would you want to come on Family Guy and maybe do a tune? And he was absolutely game, completely game to sing, sounded great, and was a great hang. He was walked in with this treasure trove of knowledge of orchestral music from that era, a lot of stuff that I just was unaware of, and was very generous with his time and in educating me to some orchestras that I had never heard of. I'd never heard of the Sauter-Finnegan Orchestra, which is sort of an avant-garde ensemble from that era.
I didn't know that about Frank Sinatra Jr. In addition to being the son of his dad and the legacy carrier of his dad, a bit of a nerd when it came to orchestral arrangements.
So was his father. I mean, Frank Sinatra Sr. appreciated the orchestra as much as probably more than any other vocalist of that era certainly before or since, with the exception of maybe Nat King Cole, who was also on par as far as his appreciation of how it could elevate a recording. But yeah, no, Frank Jr. was really an encyclopedia of knowledge when it came to pop orchestras of that era.
So you have this connection with the Sinatra family. Then Tina Sinatra gets in touch with you and says what? Like, we have all these unrecorded arrangements, orchestrations that were done for my dad, for Frank Sinatra Sr.
Yeah.
That have and do you want to buy them?
Yeah, I mean, this was after Frank Jr. passed away, and up to that point, he was the steward of the archives. And when he was gone, that responsibility fell to Tina, and she didn't want these things to wind up collecting dust somewhere. Presumably she wanted these charts to be played. And so she reached out and said, would you be interested in acquiring these things? And I said, hell yeah. It was about 1,200 boxes of charts, and it contained, of course, all of the orchestrations from the recorded albums that we know and love. I mean, all his entire repertoire and all of those orchestrations are in there. But it also contained a sizable portion of charts that had not been recorded. And our contact at Frank Sinatra Enterprises, Charlie Pignon, had something of a knowledge of what was in these archives and what had been recorded and what had not been recorded. And there were a lot of fragments, things that wouldn't be on an album for a good reason, like a 30-second adaptation of a song that he probably did for a TV show or a TV special. But there were enough charts that were legit that really could have, and in many cases should have, been on albums that were just sitting there. And Charlie helped us isolate these charts, and we went over to the Fox lot, hired an orchestra, and spent a few days just going through these boxes and just playing this stuff.
This is one of my favorite details of the story, is that, like, you can't play them on Spotify. You have to hire an orchestra to actually go through this music and hear how it sounds.
Yeah, it's. I mean, you can, if you're a composer, you can read the score and get a sense, do the Salieri thing of hearing it in your head. But at the end of the day, you really don't know what you have until you play it. And in many cases, these were charts that have been sitting in boxes for 70 years. And to sit down and hear an orchestra play this stuff live, from the first few notes, you recognize, oh, yeah, that's Nelson Riddle. And I've never heard this before. That's amazing. It's like if you're a Beatles fan, hearing something from the late 60s that you'd never heard before that's unmistakably them and yet brand new is really kind of profound. And there was a fair amount of this stuff.
What is the emotional quality of being the keeper of the family, trusting you enough to be the keeper of the music?
If this were 10, 15 years ago, I would have been a little less self-assured about it. But the 8 albums that we've done and the amount that I've learned over the course of the past 15 years, not just about the art of orchestration from, these arrangers and composers and musicians that I've worked with, but also about these arrangers of the past, about Nelson Riddle, about Billy May, Gordon Jenkins, Don Costa, to the point where I can hear a score and know pretty quickly which one of these arrangers wrote it.
Right.
And much of that education came from my longtime partner Joel McNeely, who has written scores for American Dad, Million Ways to Die in the West, The Orville, many of the albums that I've recorded. He's been a professional partner of mine for a long time, and he educated me over the years about the styles of these individual arrangers. And so at this stage, he and I sort of both felt that we were in a place where we were glad it was us, because we understood what we had, and we understood how carefully and how respectfully it had to be handled.
Let's play a little bit of it. Take a listen to this.
Arrivederci Roma. It's time for us to part. Save the wedding bells for my returning. Keep my lover's arms outstretched and yearning. Please be sure the flame of love keeps burning in her heart.
That is Seth MacFarlane with Arrivederci Roma from his new album Lush Life, the Lost Sinatra Arrangements. So let me just make sure I break this down for people.
I'm so glad we weren't making eye contact during that. That's always so weird on the shows.
I usually like to stare the guests in the eye while I listen to their music.
Just merciful.
And I do a thumbs up or thumbs down while I listen to it. For people who don't know what we're talking about, these are scores. These are sheets of paper. These are music notes. These are lyrics written by the acclaimed music arrangers and composers who would either write or arrange or orchestrate this music for Frank Sinatra. So Nelson Riddle, Billy May, Don Costa. These works had never been recorded or released. It's almost like a puzzle piece for what could have been or might have been or should have been Sinatra recordings. What is the emotion? Like, how do you feel then? I mean, it's fine to say that, like, I should be the steward of this stuff. I feel comfortable being the steward of this music. It's another thing to know that you are going to be on record singing these songs, sort of filling Frank Sinatra's shoes in these songs that were supposed to be his and with a 70-piece orchestra. What's going through your mind when it comes time to sing?
I don't think anyone alive, unless they're lying, would say, "Oh yeah, I should be the one. I'm the only one who's going to be able to sing these songs like he did." No, there's Sinatra stands alone. Like none of us, I'm under no delusions that I'm existing in that world. But it's what I can do at this point, just because of the education that I've gotten, is make the best guess as to what it is that he would have wanted to hear from this music. And that's on a lot of different levels. It's oftentimes as simple as tempo. How fast or how slow do you record these songs? Because on the score sheets, it doesn't always tell you anything more in depth than brightly or with expression or slowly with feeling, which could be interpreted a number of different ways. I mean, the slightest variation in tempo just changes the tune of, changes the feeling of a song like this. There are things that certain arrangers did that were so specific to them. The scoopy saxophone parts that Billy May would write, and if one of those was included in a chart, as I think in On a Wonderful Day Like Today, and possibly in Flying Down to Rio on this album, those hallmarks are in there, and oftentimes it's the only anchor that you have to determine how the arranger would have wanted to hear these charts, how fast or how slow. And so you kind of use that as sort of a guideline, and you kind of build out from there. And so
you're kind of a detective. You have to be sort of a detective around this, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, you have just little clues. And if in hearing other Billy May charts, you know that he probably would not want that sax part played too fast, because in this song, and this song, and this song, and this song, he played it a certain way. So probably he was thinking the same thing here, which tells you a lot. And it's a lot of information to start with, because you have this, you at least have a foundation to build out from. And so there was a lot of that, and there was a lot of. I'm glad we didn't do this 10 or 15 years ago, as I said, because I think I would not have been equipped to help solve those mysteries in a way that I feel like I am now.
It's a result of a lot of deep work into these orchestrators and arrangers and all these and these great musicians, and Sinatra himself. And it was fun, Seth, to read about your sort of steeping yourself in the Sinatra world. And you worked with Lee and Sally Sweetland at one point, who were singers themselves, also vocal coaches, and kind of they would help out musicians. Barbra Streisand famously worked with them. Dean Martin famously worked with them. Sinatra himself worked with them. And I read that when you took vocal coaching lessons from them, I was like curious, obviously, to like how do they teach someone to sing more like Sinatra? And that one of the things that I saw they told you was show your teeth.
Yes.
What does that mean?
I think it means it brightens the sound. Like they were big on showing your teeth when you sing.
Like literally, like when you're singing, show your teeth.
Yeah, and they showed me some stills of Sinatra when he was recording, and they're not wrong. Like there's a lot of, there's a lot of curling of the lips and showing of the teeth to presumably get a brighter sound. They were amazing. I miss them very much. I trained with them until they both passed away at around 100, and then with their son Steve, he passed away. So it's there's many a day when I'm recording that I wish I still had them as to guide me, because they worked out of a house in the valley, and you drive over there and you'd go in, and she'd play the piano and he'd coach you, and it was just, their whole style was so accessible, and they'd really push you to work that voice in a way that ideally didn't require any help, that you could go into a studio, record something, and that was what it was, and you didn't need to go in and do a hell of a lot of post work because you had done the work beforehand. And they were just kind of amazing people. I mean, I started working with them when they were probably about their late 80s or even 90. And just even the conversations that you have about that era, and with people who were there and remember it, was really a gift. But as coaches, they were just wonderful, and yeah, as you say, what an impressive resume to have worked with all those people.
I'm aware that the answer to this could be because it's fun and because I want to do it, but I feel like there might be people shouting at the radios right now, going like, "But why? Like, why does the guy behind Family Guy, who was like this kind of prodigal animator and got a gig with Hanna-Barbera really early, and like the fame and fortune, and does the whole thing with Family Guy, and falls in love with Sinatra? Sure, who doesn't? But I can hear people yelling at the radio going like, but why go to his vocal coaches, and why try to learn to be more like Sinatra and sing? Like, why?
Is this the kind of show where people scream at the radio?
Yeah, I mean, almost exclusively, sadly. I wish they smiled more.
So the why is really just because it's just, I was brought up surrounded by music. I was, my father sang beautifully, played the guitar. My mother would duet with him. My sister and I were both in, did a lot of musical theater when we were kids. I was in a church choir, if you can believe that. We were just surrounded by music. My parents felt that music was very, very important to the development of our brain. In fact, the church choir that I was in, the choir director started this local theater group in our town, and we were doing Gilbert and Sullivan plays, when I was like 9 or 10 years old. And so it was, you were just getting this thorough grounding in some really complex music really early on. And so I developed an appreciation for complex music, for complex orchestration and composition. And it's just always been something that's stirred me. As I said, like I love classic film scores. I can listen to a John Williams score start to finish, and like any album, and enjoy the hell out of it. It was very important to me when Family Guy started that we use an orchestra for that show.
Yeah.
When I did the Orville, we used about an 80-piece orchestra for every episode of that show. It's just something that's always been important to me, and that I've tried to keep it as a significant part of my life. And when this came along, it was like, this is perfect. This is right up my alley.
For people who don't know, Family Guy, a lot of the music for these kind of shows would be done in MIDI. They would be done by a keyboard player who would be playing the trumpet in parts, or using, and Family Guy has used a an orchestra, the same way that any of these sort of classic films of our time would have used an orchestra. That's not really done anymore. Your first record in 2011, I think, was recorded on reel to reel. Like that's not really,
which we still do,
which is not done anymore. Like Seth, like I feel like it's more than just it's fun and cool and it reminds me of my childhood. I feel like you're saying like it's important here, and I want to know why.
Oh yeah. No, well, I mean, look, you talk about television scores. I mean, look, when I was a kid, the worst Saturday morning or late afternoon cartoon shows that you watched all had an orchestra. I mean, when I would watch Transformers and G.I. Joe, and there was an orchestra, and they actually just released those scores recently in album form, and you go and you listen to them and you're like, this is like these guys were writing their asses off for us, and this music is, it's not Mozart, but it's legit. It's like it's much more legit than what we're hearing now. I mean, the why is just, I mean, what are you passionate about? I mean, when I sit down and I listen to a John Williams theme or a Elmer Bernstein theme or a Jerry Goldsmith theme, it's genuinely affecting music. It's moving orchestral music. I love it. And so it's what you grow up with. It's what your brain develops on. And my brain, had a steady diet of that kind of music growing up, and I just learned to love it.
And you don't want to lose it. Like when it comes to your own shows, you don't want to lose those orchestras. You don't want to lose that sensation. Right.
And but beyond that, I think certainly for television, something that I learned, and I credit The Simpsons with this in a lot of ways. The Simpsons used an orchestra from the get-go, and I don't know if they still do, but they did for many, many years. And by that point, when that show came on the air, I was very aware of the fact that there was the best way I've ever been able to put this is that it just made everything feel a little more important. Even if an audience doesn't know that what they're hearing is live orchestral music as opposed to synths, on a purely visceral level, it just makes it seem like something that isn't just being ground out. Like, oh, this is something to pay attention to. It's just different. It's a sound that is still in this day and age nearly impossible to duplicate without having a room full of live musicians.
It's a beautiful thing. For people who know your work and have been watching Family Guy as long as I have, they'll know that like big musical numbers, Gilbert and Sullivan references, and big musical numbers that have been a part of the show for a really long time. And this one has been on my mind in particular for the past maybe couple of weeks.
They're as stuffy as the stuffiest of special interest groups. Make a joke about your bowels and they order in the troops.
Any baby with a brain could tell them everybody poops.
Take a tip, take a lesson. You'll never win by messing with the fellas at the freaking FCC.
Seth, can you tell us what that is from season 4 from Family Guy?
Is that season 4?
Yeah.
Was that for? Oh my God! Yes, that was the FCC song. That was written. That was written back when after the Super Bowl, which I guess was, oh God, I think it was either a year before or a couple years before, the infamous Janet Jackson incident.
Yeah, the wardrobe malfunction.
The wardrobe malfunction, yes. And it became something that was really, I mean, it was such a touchstone moment that every network was just really hypersensitive and cracking down because this just reached a point where it was a big deal. It was such a big deal that I remember on more than one occasion, and I'm not making this up, Fox broadcast standards, when we would be arguing over a joke, Fox broadcast standards would say, in this post-Janet Jackson world, that's just not going to fly. Yeah. In this post-Janet Jackson world. And so we wrote what does that even?
I didn't know you were living in a pre-Janet Jackson world before that.
Exactly, like everything. It was an odd way to word it. Like it was post Janet Jackson. It's like like God. It's like you're talking about World War II.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But we there were a lot of we wrote about it. We did a whole episode where I can't even remember what the plot was. I just remember Peter encounters the FCC and they sing this song about it. And there was some concern, I think, at Fox that this would be antagonizing to the FCC, and I think at one point they requested a copy of the episode, and the word we got back was they actually thought it was funny.
Okay.
So that's but that's what that's from. That's I know it's very timely, but
it's very timely. I mean, during the past couple of weeks, I mean, for people who don't know, you were singing about the FCC back in 2005. The FCC really much in the headlines right now around ABC's suspension of Jimmy Kimmel Live after his comments about the alleged killer of Charlie Kirk. That song was literally going through my mind every time they would talk about the FCC on television. But it is a very different time than when you were doing that 20 years ago. Like, does writing satire in general or like that feel different than it did 20 years ago?
I think that's the question that everyone's really kind of wrestling with right now. I mean, I do remember 20 years ago. It's just 20 years ago. What the hell?
I know. Crazy.
Our broadcast standards head telling us that she was going back and forth from DC to confer directly with the FCC. There was a lot of direct conversations that were going, like a lot of dialogue that was happening on a regular basis, and there were a lot of conversations at high levels of the network about the Super Bowl and about how this affected everything, and about how it was going to affect things going forward. I was day to day on Family Guy at that point. I was writing, that was like the early days of that show, and so I was just in the thick of it. And I haven't been there since it's about 2010, 2011.
But would you want to be? Like, is in addition to outside of the lifestyle and all that? I mean, in terms of like writing satire, writing things that are satirical of a government then, versus writing things that are, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think this is where we all kind of wish that like Norman Lear was alive to get his point of view, because that's what he did. To me, it's like, I always look at like All in the Family as the benchmark. I think if you're writing something, again, like what the late night hosts do is something very different than what we do. That's a much more like, you're really in the eye of the storm there. What we do is it's allegorical, it's satirical in the way that like The Simpsons is satirical, or like All in the Family is satirical. You're telling stories that should have a point of view, but at the same time, it's like you have a very diverse audience, and like a lot of them are going to agree with you, and a lot of them are not going to agree with you. Like, if you go in screaming at your audience from just this, I'm just talking about scripted TV, like what we do. If you go in yelling at your audience, you're really certainly not ever going to change anybody's mind, and you're probably not going to make something that feels like its first job is to entertain. So in that sense, what we do versus what these guys do is it's fundamentally different. I haven't really felt the squeeze that maybe they have, and I think it's just the nature of what I do is just fundamentally, it's just a different kind of job. So I mean, who the hell knows? It's like the year's young, but so far it's been, I don't know. Part of me wishes that I was back in there writing so I could kind of get a better read on this, because every time I'm asked, I'm like, I feel like I'm the dumb guy in the room who just doesn't really know how to break it down.
Well, I think what I appreciate you saying is the idea that you can't go in yelling at your audience. I mean, that's what I'm taking from that is in terms of what you think, like in terms of what I got from that is that there is you write something with a point of view, but you have to be very methodical about how you get that point of view across.
Yeah, it's certainly, and again, it's like Norman Lear was such an idol of mine, and I miss these kinds of conversations with him because he's, you know, he had this just wonderfully big-hearted way of looking at things. You know, it's like we all have an Archie Bunker in our life. Like I have Archie Bunkers in my family. And I, you know, we disagree on things, but I love them. And so there was something he said that he lived by when he wrote his shows that I always thought was interesting. That like, God, I can't remember whose quote this is. Every man is my superior in that I may learn something from him. And he kind of governed his writing by that credo. And I think it's not a terrible way to kind of at least begin, because if you go in trying to, you know, use your characters as a mouthpiece, you can make a point. And as a writer, it's your, you know, it's like, as Rod Serling would tell you, yeah, it's your job and your right to make a point. It's just how you do it is, you know, I always kind of choose to follow his lead, just because I think I rewatched that show start to finish.
All in the Family?
All 9 seasons earlier this year, and I was just like jaw-droppingly amazed at how fucking good it was, like how funny it was, and how, like, you know, you love the characters that you agree with, and you love the characters that you disagree with. And it's like he was just a master at creating this world that we could all kind of find something of ourselves in, no matter where we looked.
Let me go out like this. Lush Life, the Lost Sinatra Arrangements. Which song on it do you most wish you could have heard Sinatra sing himself?
How Did She Look?
Why is that?
How Did She Look?
Why that one?
Because it was considered for the Only the Lonely album. Probably one of the greatest Nelson and Riddle arrangements I think I've ever heard. I don't understand why it wasn't on that record. There are songs on that record every song on that record is great, but there are a couple songs that I listen to and I think, wow, How Does She Look would have been a great track to put here instead of what they have. And so it's a tragedy in many ways that Sinatra never recorded it. I am overjoyed that I got to record it. But when you listen to that chart, you realize that recording, had he laid it down, would have been one of the great Sinatra recordings of all time, easily.
I'm glad you did it and not some weird AI Sinatra, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
I'm glad that didn't happen. I think, man, I told you this. I think it's a great record. I don't know if you're going to get enough props for this. I think on a singing level, it's a very hard record to sing. And for people who know anything about singing, it's a very challenging record. I thought you nailed it. And congratulations on it. And thanks for the time.
Thank you. I appreciate it.